Hey everybody. In this video, I'm going to be talking about and going in depth on the two runs of Miles Morales in his comic book life between his original creator, Brian Michael Bendis, and the run that most recently ended with Saladin Ahmed. Both brought a lot of different things to the table. Brian Michael Bendis obviously created him and had a longer run, but Saladin Ahmed might have brought some interesting aspects to Miles as a character, so hope you enjoy it. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.
Hey everyone, I hope you've caught up on the last two videos on Miles Morales and his comics and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. If you haven't, go watch those videos now because they're very important to understanding parts of this video you're about to watch. In the last video, we talked about Miles Morales, his journey in the last 10 years, but I omitted the Saladin Ahmed comics until now because I've noticed this narrative about my favorite Spider-Man. And honestly, it really has put me off. A lot of fans and creators have noted a lack of depth in Miles' character, a lack of charisma in the Brian Michael Bendis comics, and a lack of creativity in those comics overall. And so because I have read just about all the Miles Morales content you could take in the last couple of weeks, I am ready to make a decision on this idea. What I'm going to be doing today is comparing those two comics. I'm going to compare Saladin and Bendis' stories, how they've changed Miles, because there are some notable differences that really change the story and the characters that we're reading about. In the Into the Spider-Verse video, I noted that Miles had a clear, concrete why. When his uncle Aaron destroyed his trust and then subsequently redeemed himself on the rooftop. In that moment, Miles sees his uncle for who he is. While being a flawed person, he is still very much that loving uncle he's always known. But after all that, he is quickly killed by Kingpin. And there you have Miles' why, the reason he chose to take responsibility and use his powers for good. Contrast this to the Bendis comics, where Uncle Aaron starts out as the same loving uncle, but ends up flipping that character when he selfishly manipulates his nephew for his own personal gain, and in a lot of ways lessens the impact of his eventual death. This makes Uncle Aaron evil in my mind. He suddenly doesn't really care about Miles, he's just an abusive prick. Not to mention, Miles was already well into being Spider-Man, because he's just a good person who saw the void that needed to be filled. There was no moment or reason into this leap of heroism. It's just who Miles is. As I said before, neither is really bad to me. It's just that, well, number one, Miles moves on fairly quickly from his uncle's death. It's mentioned from time to time, but you would think that Miles would maybe even blame himself for the death of his uncle because he couldn't control his powers. This should be a traumatic event that could do a lot to a 13-year-old's mind. It should feel heavy, but it kind of feels like Aaron was never that important to him in the first place. Number two, if the comics had more of those aspects that the movie had, you would care about Aaron so much more. Because instead, Aaron becomes so much less likable. It's so hard to empathize with this guy who's just abusing his nephew like this. The only real downside is that we lose an antagonist, someone that could easily be Miles' arch nemesis. Number three is, I think I kind of took this moment for granted, because when you think about it, superheroes or any hero in general, they're putting themselves on the line, their lives on the line, the lives of their families on the line every single day. It's an incredibly bold thing to do. And so for a 13-year-old to essentially kind of throw his life away for being a superhero and have no concrete moment or no reason why seems kind of odd, doesn't it? Sticking with the relationship of uncle and nephew, in Saladin's comics, this strong bond between the two is much more apparent. And Aaron is way more likable. Now you no longer have an uncle that let his greed corrupt him and manipulate his loving nephew. You have two characters that share a real connection. When the two try to escape Ultimatum's building, you see what they really mean to each other. This isn't the same unbalanced relationship it was before. You don't want Aaron out of Miles' life. You want him to stay in it. Aaron Davis is now a man who knows he's done wrong in his life. He wants to have some sort of family again. He wants to put things right. But unfortunately, career changes are never easy. so he still has to be the Prowler and do bad things for bad people. However, he isn't really a villain anymore. He's more of an anti-hero. He's mostly a good person stuck in a bad spot in his life. It's so easy to empathize with him now. He's someone we can root for. So when he unselfishly sacrifices himself to save everyone else, it hits us so hard. To me, Genki is one of the most important characters in Miles' story. And the disappointing thing about these new comics is that Genki is actually sort of been pushed to the background as other characters have become more prominent. For me, this is the biggest issue with the Saladin Ahmed comics. I feel like Genki is essential for Miles as much as any other character could be. Genki is Miles' rock in many ways. Sure, he tells a lot of people about his secret identity, but he's been there from the start of Miles' journey. He's the most supportive and understanding person. And obviously, Miles has seen some things in his life as Spider-Man. So it's nice to have that comic relief. Having said all of that, I have always felt that Uncle Aaron and Miles' bond was really special, even from the start. It's sad that we didn't really get it until recently, but I'm happy that we finally did. Next, I want to talk about Miles' charisma and his cultural heritage. Miles Morales, as we know, has Black and Puerto Rican heritage. And even when others point out that Miles is Black, he will at times be quick to point out that he's also Puerto Rican, so you can tell that he's proud of where his whole family comes from. But he knows Spanish, and Rio speaks Spanish to him, and yet he doesn't for some reason. At first, we only get a glimpse of how important his culture is to him. In the Saladin comics, almost right off the bat, Miles is speaking Spanish. There's much more clarity on how important his culture is to him. Another cultural significance is where he's from, Brooklyn, New York. There's no way we can forget where he's from now and what neighborhood shaped him. Miles being a teenager is in that part of life where his neighborhood would heavily influence him, whether he's proud of Brooklyn or he resents it. In the new comics, he claims Brooklyn as his city. He's proud to be from there, and it's his turf, and he has to protect it. All of this might seem forced to some, but for me, and I'm sure a lot of people with similar cultural backgrounds to Miles, this is extremely important. This is how people gravitate to characters. It's why Peter Parker and Miles Morales are two of the most popular characters in comics. They're the most down-to-earth, relatable heroes to so many people. And this just gives Miles a lot more depth than he had before. So the complaints about his depth and charisma are pretty much gone. Finally, and this is probably the biggest and maybe most important change, is Miles talking more in his own comics. The action never slows down for Miles, and of course, it's superhero comics. There has to be a lot of action, no doubt. But I mean literally. There is so much fighting in Miles' life sometimes, I can't even find time to breathe. And I'm sure it's hard for him too. This dude is constantly beating someone up or getting beaten up himself. The issue with that was we didn't get to dive into the character very much. He was always having to jump from one problem to the next. So that charisma, which I do think was there, was being stifled. His character development was completely stunted as a result. Currently, we actually see Miles Morales the student, something we never saw before. We see that he's apparently a very creative and talented writer, which is a very defining aspect of him we previously had no clue about. Think about this for a second. If Miles is supposed to be someone who juggles a superhero life and a normal life, he has to get a job at some point. So he needs a career path. He needs to be juggling friends, family, schoolwork, and fighting crime all at the same time. And now we finally have all of it. Now we have a more fleshed out and developed character. Previously, his supporting characters would actually do a lot of the talking. They would be carrying the story for him. And they did a good job because the supporting characters are amazing, no complaints. But now it's different. He still has those supporting characters, but it's him leading his story. And it's him that we've gotten to know so much better because of it. Listen, I know it seems like I hate the Brian Michael Bendis comics, and I really don't at all. I love them, actually. I don't see them as failures in any way. They have a special place in my heart, and I'll reread them all the time because they're awesome. If I had to pick one, I think it is pretty clear though that I prefer the Saladin Ahmed run. I just think that he added a lot to a lot of great characters. He enhanced the story and added so much depth and charisma that was needed for Miles. And I really hope that his stories are written like this in the future. But what do you think? Do you prefer the Saladin comics or the Bendis run? Let us know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.